Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. Over the spring, few things have impacted the world of agriculture more than the weather. And we figured with summer on our doorstep, it was time to check in with Greg Soulje about what he's watching over the months ahead. Greg, it has been warm as you look out over this summer. Do you expect the warmth to intensify in the near term?
And it has been a wet summer as well, and I think that's also testimony to that El Nino is kind of winding down a little bit quicker and faster. And as we take a look at weather here in the weeks and months to come, we've got to keep an eye on La Nina, timed out for mid to late summertime, and typically that brings back dryness and heat concerns as we get deeper on into the summertime season. But here it is, the early summer outlook, getting ready to roll into astronomical summer. And here is the heat really lined up from the Missouri back to the Divide, but warmth from the Pacific Northwest down to the Rio Grande. It's expected to ease up. We set records for the month of May down through the Rio Grande and a number of them down through Florida, by the way. And again, from time to time, we continue to see a little troughiness over the Northeast to New England. But if it's in the ground, should be in the ground, and soil moisture is even keeled and you haven't had to done any significant replanting, there ought to be some accelerated crop growth and development. Now, from a moisture standpoint, probably no better than normal moisture. Get into the mid portions and late portions of June. Quarter to a half inch in fair coverages. It's far from complete coverages. What we do foresee are a couple of tropical systems trying to get going here. One of a what we call synoptic scale and a tropical feature of the Gulf. So wet weather across the Gulf Coast, otherwise dry into the Northeast to New England. So heat builds and precip winds down further across the heartland here as we head through early summertime.
As you look deeper into midsummer, Greg, are those two trends intact? Do we still see it warming up and drying down?
Yeah, basically speaking, we continue to see these spells of heat that build on in, they back on off. The jet stream still fairly strong, but weakening. Cool air laid out for the St. Lawrence River Valley. Normal temperatures over the eastern and southeastern part of the country. So again, if you're okay with soil moisture, rapid crop growth and development, rapid maturation of the winter wheat fields, and probably some fairly healthy irrigation demands off the Sierra. Thank goodness we had a significant snow season out there. Moisture, plenty of it. Cotton could be in jeopardy with quality with a tropical system here. Another one over the southwestern parts of the Atlantic. Look at the expanse of dry time over the southwestern part of the country. Again, no better than normal precip that's typically in midsummer time. Far from complete, less coverages as you would expect, so there may be some drying pockets that to get going, dryness and drought over parts of the heartland.
All right, Greg, let's take a look at the late summer period just prior to harvest. What trends should we be watching for meteorologically?
And if you've got timely rains and you didn't have to replant, then okay, we kind of get things rapidly towards maturity. But again, root systems are going to be a little suspect coming off the wet springtime season. But this is hot stuff here. This is pushing 100 into parts of the central Corn Belt, low to mid-90s in the northern reaches, heat all the way back to the Divide. Western part of the country, some cooling expected there. The tropics remain very busy again, north and west of the tropics as the systems come off the Atlantic or the Gulf. You build up high pressure up aloft. So again, we think drier, maybe the D word, drought comes into play over parts of the Midwest, and maybe some quality loss as well out there. Anyway, wet weather for the cotton belt areas of the deep south and southeastern part of the country. Normal precip, and that will be a normal monsoon season over the southwestern part of the country. Precip will pick up into the Pacific Northwest.
Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with AD2 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. It's time to dig into these markets. Joining us this week is Mike Zuzolo, president of Global Commodity Analytics. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Mike. Thanks for having me back.
The last time we spoke, you mentioned that wheat was the driver in the commodity markets. We saw it pulling corn higher over the past couple of weeks. Mike, is wheat still in the driver's seat in the commodity complex?
I think it is, but it's less so, Mike. And historically, when we want to go up another leg in the ag sector, especially given the seasonals that we're now fighting in terms of northern hemisphere harvest for the wheat, the planting of the row crops, I think we do really need to rely more upon, and the trade wants to rely more upon, the outside markets, and specifically the crude oil market. If we're still talking about higher for longer interest rates, that should suggest higher for longer inflation, which should suggest some more upside potential, not downside potential in the crude oil market. And I think that's been kind of the missing link as we've gotten through the month of May and into June. And this big pullback, you can kind of see it's been led by the copper, led by the crude oil market. And I think that makes sense and resonates because we've been dealing with the weather and supply driven market in the agriculture sector for the better part of 2 years. And I think we have not gotten out of that market. The trade's still very worried about demand, and rightfully so from a standpoint of another week of negative weekly export sales for the wheat market this past week. So I do think we need the macro side, specifically the crude oil at this point.
For those producers here in North America who are looking at harvest just coming right down the line, Mike, what's your advice for managing that crop as it comes off the combine?
I don't think that the world supply for wheat and corn has stabilized. I actually think it's still going down. And so crude oil is number one on my list of importance. The WASDE report coming up in June is going to be exceptionally important to match up with that analysis. I think the trade has gotten to the point where they think that the supplies have leveled off in the world for wheat and corn. I think the soil moisture profiles in key areas of Russia, center west Brazil, both would suggest being at the lowest in 7 years in some cases. We are not gaining production right now, Mike. So if you're going to put a floor in place, I think you need to do it, or I'd recommend you do it in a paper position, generally speaking.
All right, Mike, let's switch our focus over to the corn market here. We saw, as you mentioned, corn rallied right along with wheat. We saw it pop through the month of May, and now, of course, we've seen that July contract pull right back to where we were trading at the end of April. Mike, is the weather premium done for the spring planting window?
I think the weather premium here in the States is because of that 75% good to excellent number. I think that gave the trade the mindset that we are going to be in that 180 national yield level, Mike. But I would also say that clients in Southern Illinois, clients in parts of Iowa and Wisconsin, and other states, key other state Corn Belt states, are suggesting to me they're going to move from corn to soybean acres. And so it's a tougher call for the corn. I think the best thing the corn has for it, as far as if the U.S. crop is getting at least bigger or stabilizing at this point, we still have outside markets or trade that needs to focus on areas like Brazil and Argentina still. I still think there are some pretty substantial declines coming for those two countries, or could be.
Mike, next week we're going to get the next WASDE report from USDA. Do you expect any big changes to corn, either on the international stage or domestically?
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking for closer to a 250 million metric ton ending stocks number for 24-25 wheat, maybe closer to 305 in the corn. If 305 were to happen, Mike, that would be about 7 million less than those brand new numbers we just got this past month.
Okay. All right. So we'll be watching for that here this next Wednesday, but stick with us, folks. We'll have more with Mike Zuzolo of Global Commodity Analytics when we return on This Week in Agribusiness. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. And we're back talking markets with Mike Zuzolo of Global Commodity Analytics. Mike, before we went to break, we were talking about what's to come on next week's World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report. My question is, in soybeans, given the rainfall we've seen in Brazil, given the planting delays here in the U.S., are you expecting any big adjustments from Uncle Sam?
Not big adjustments quite yet, Mike, but I think that's down the line, especially given that these areas east of the Mississippi River are probably looking at switching and swapping out with prevent plant dates now passed from corn to soybeans, especially south of I-70 is what I'm kind of picking up. But I think the biggest problem with the soybeans, and maybe the best way to describe the importance of those macro and outside markets, is pretty much all the key currencies are at or hitting new lows or at their 2024 lows against the US dollar, and the Brazilian currency just pegged a new one-year low against the US dollar. So between the product markets not giving support and the currency markets, the uncertainty in China, and increased US soybean acres, I still think soybeans are probably the weakest fundamental link in the chain. If you see them going up by themselves, I'm inclined to think that's probably not going to last very long. They, I think, need the crude oil through the soybean oil, and need especially the wheat and the corn to support them.
Mike, I'm going to ask you to gaze into your crystal ball for a second. We lost $12 here over this past month in November soybeans. Is that a mark to hold out for as you're looking for these new crop sales?
No, I don't think so. I'd really encourage producers probably to look more towards holding out for more closely to 5 or 5.15 on December corn, and put more of an emphasis on that for more upside potential, as opposed to trying to get back those old highs in the soybeans.
All right, Mike, let's turn our focus over to the protein markets. Cattle up and down, continues to see relative or at least historic strength. We're in this peak summer grilling season. Where do you see this cattle complex going over the next couple of weeks?
It's interesting. I see corn and cattle, fat cattle, very similar right now, Mike, in that they've got the cash support underneath them because of tightening supplies. If we want to see a push to the upside, though, that's got to be demand led. And I think the summer could be a little bit tougher on the cattle market, on the beef market here than we've been used to the past few. We saw in the weekly export sales a pretty weak beef number. China was not part of that, whereas they were for the pork side of the equation. I think we're starting to tighten up on the consumption side because I think the pocketbooks are starting to hurt. But does that mean there's a lot of downside? I think the supplies are tight enough that we probably have limited downside at this point, unless a new disease or policy pressure would come in from out of nowhere.
Mike, looking out, given the high costs we see in the cattle complex right now for producers, interest rates, heifers, all of that stuff, how far out would you be looking to manage that risk using the board? Would you be selling live cattle out into 2025 at all at this point?
I would for select months, Mike, but I think these calf prices have gotten so high, these 6-weight calves, well over $3, still running so high. You really have to look at it on an individual basis at this point. But to give you an idea of right here in the near term, we've got June futures premium to the August futures. Negotiated cash is premium to the June. So I don't see a good hedge possibility in the August cattle, for instance, in the near term. But on the deferreds, I'd have to speak to somebody individually because they may be carrying very high priced calves at this point.
That's true. Those auctions can make those calf acquisition costs pretty high when things are this tight. Mike, real quick, before we let you go, the hog market, we saw China back in as a purchaser on this last report. Do you think China sticks in all summer?
I do think they will. I think that the missing link for the trade, maybe in terms of worrying about inflation going away for the ag sector, is China. As long as the U.S.-China trade policy stays okay, I think we've got China healing up gradually, and I think that keeps them in the pork market.
All right, keeps them in the pork market, keeps them buying U.S. protein. Mike Zuzolo, Global Commodity Analytics, thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Greg Soulje now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, Greg Soulje, looking out to the Pacific Northwest, summer is in effect. Is it a seasonal average as you'd expect out there?
Yeah, with a little heat into the maybe south end of the Intermountain West, and at times over the past week to 10 days making its way into parts of Washington State, pushing winter wheat towards maturity. Some early harvest operations are going on there. Spring grains are moving along very nicely, and pretty much par for the course early to mid-June setup out into the Pacific Northwest when you tend to get a lack of any organized moisture. Still a little bit of a chilly air mass across the Canadian prairie. The last push of cooler, drier air across areas of the Dakotas through the upper Midwest, particularly Minnesota and Wisconsin. Farther to the east, the need for that coming off the recent rains over the past week to 10 days. Very little action on the maps and charts heading on through the middle and late portions of the week. The heat builds on northward back in to maybe Treasure Valley, parts of southern sections of Montana. Worst of the drought lined up here on westward. We've had some significant rains over the past few weeks across the eastern parts of Montana, but the heat pushing 90 degrees up to the Black Hills and maybe sections of the Red River Valley of the north. So again, nothing unusual for the time of year for early to mid-June in the Pacific Northwest and parts of the northern plains. Warmth across the southwestern sections of the country past week or so. 100-degree heat across the valleys of California, 110, 105 desert southwest. Cotton planting operations are wrapped on up. There's a bit of a boundary on the north end of this capped off atmosphere that might tonight might trigger a couple of gusty thunderstorms. Boy, it has been a record-setting month of May across Texas and the Gulf Coast areas with that incredible hot ridge of high pressure, which will influence the Midwest here in the weeks to come. And the tropics appear to be getting busy in the Gulf of Mexico. A little system offshore San Diego, a little morning low cloud and mist and sprinkle activity there. Quiet weather through the valleys of California. Triple-digit readings back to the Four Corners, and some of that heat building northward in parts of Oklahoma and Texas, western Kansas and Oklahoma. Mike, you know, the worst of the drought continues on farther to the east in relatively good order.
It seems like the activity has been cooling down over the middle part of the country here over the past couple of weeks. Greg, does that trend continue?
Well, the cooling trend will be winding down this week, and then the pattern shift finally is underway as getting an extending, broadening window of opportunity for some of the areas that have been drowned out of late with recent rain. So it's a drier scenario, and with time here in the next 10 to 15 days of warm up and temperatures, we do see the ridge materializing across the middle part of the country. Weak frontal boundary, just these resurgent pushes of cool air aloft, maybe a few sprinkles of rain, a couple of showers for the Great Lakes region. Otherwise, the warmth is more dominant up to about I-80 for a change. A couple of thunderstorms over the high plains areas of Nebraska. Look at the expanse of dry time across the Corn Belt into the upper Midwest and sections of the Great Lakes region. Opportunities to make hay there, get it wrapped up for the season, maybe even a second pass through the batting order with planting operations. But probably the most favorable setup of weather we've seen across the Midwest here over the past few weeks. Here is the core of the heat, hopefully tempered with this frontal boundary settling on southward. Severe weather potential where we do bust the cap across the Gulf Coast area. Looky here, we'll keep an eye on some lowering pressures, maybe a pickup on tropical rains from the Delta on to the east. Otherwise, it's summertime on the southern plains.
Does this severe weather threat extend all the way to the Atlantic coast next week?
I don't think so. It's maybe an isolated storm, but nothing widespread. We'll get a couple of troughs to work on through in this deepening trough over this part of the country. But from the Ohio back to the north and west, plenty of dry time expected outside of a stray shower. And looky here again. When's the last time you saw the weather guy put a forecast up with hardly any moisture across the Corn Belt? So get it done while you may. Maybe a couple of severe storms and upper trough over sections of the northeast of New England. But it is a drier weather pattern for the Corn Belt. Here is the atmospheric cap, the heat across the Gulf Coast, but a frontal boundary and the jet stream winds and these converging air masses and off the Gulf and the Atlantic. Get showers and thunderstorms are going, and a pickup on tropical rains, perhaps the first of several systems in the weeks to come.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Sustainable aviation fuel. It's a phrase we've heard a lot over the last 5 years as airline companies around the world have faced pressure to cut back on their fossil fuel usage. Sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF as it's called in the industry, is a product that's chemically identical to jet fuel, but instead of being made from conventional crude oil, it's produced from renewable products. This could be waste cooking oil, this could be rendered animal products, or importantly, corn ethanol and soy oil. Now, proponents of sustainable aviation fuel see big business. The airline industry around the globe uses 83 million gallons of fuel per day. Replacing even a small fraction of that with bio-based ingredients could lead to a huge new market for these renewable fuels. Efforts are underway in Washington, D.C. to promote the production of SAF. 2 new tax credits have been unveiled recently. One, the 45B credit, designed to encourage production for 2024 and 2025, and upcoming, the 45Z credit, which is expected to encourage production running from 2026 through the end of the decade. Now, the Biden administration has set a 3 billion gallon goal of SAF production by 2030, so there is a lot of enthusiasm pushing forward in this market. Now, one of the interesting things of SAF is that it doesn't matter what it's made from, which means that proponents throughout agriculture are trying different products. Some companies are looking to make jet fuel from used cooking oil. Some are looking at rendered animal products. Others are looking at corn oil. Recently, I had the chance to talk with Nancy Young, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Gevo, a renewable biofuels company, and I asked her what exactly Gevo is doing as it looks to the future.
We're a renewable fuels and chemicals company that absolutely works with the agricultural sector to optimize feedstocks and help develop further low-carbon feedstocks opportunities to make fuel and chemicals and feed and food.
It does everything, but let's dive into a little more detail. Specifically, what type of reduced carbon fuel is Gevo looking to create, and where?
Well, one of our favorites is really focusing on sustainable aviation fuel. And our technology is an alcohol-to-jet technology, primarily looking at creating ethanol, low-carbon ethanol from low-carbon feedstock, turning that into jet fuel. And we've been doing that in a pilot facility for many years in Laverne, Minnesota. We are now working to create our first large-scale commercial facility in South Dakota. We call that affectionately our Net Zero 1 facility, because we're aiming at net zero fuels, chemicals, and feed and food.
When do you hope that facility to be up and running?
Well, we are working really hard to get through the final elements of finance. We've got all the design in place, the engineering in place, and so we are working with the Department of Energy right now to finalize a loan guarantee program. And we are expecting to have that facility operating with commercial supply in 2027.
That commercial supply, when I hear these airline companies talk, it sounds like they are quite hungry for that commercial supply of low-carbon jet fuel. Why do we still need federal incentives? Why does the government still need to be involved to bring this industry to the airlines?
Yeah, well, certainly they're keenly focused on getting to their own climate goals, so the demand is there. But creating a whole new fuel infrastructure to really optimize agricultural feedstock and other opportunities, you need capital. You're going to build new facilities. You need to make sure that you have the infrastructure to do that. And frankly, also the public policy to support that. And that's a big part of what we've been working with, both here in Washington, but also directly with the farmers and what they can do. We like to meet the farmers where they are in their practices and then work together to say, are there more things that could be done to optimize that opportunity for lower carbon agriculture? What you're doing today, maybe you're doing low till, maybe you're doing some manure instead of synthetic fertilizers. Can we build on that with you? And we have a very specific grant with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to kind of help with that partnership.
It's going to be exciting to watch agriculture bring fuels to the next generation. Nancy, if we've got audience who want to learn more about Gevo, what's the best place to go?
Well, we certainly have a website, so at gevo.com is what I would recommend, but we're always happy to meet people, talk to them. Part of it is about really demystifying the process. A lot of people say, well, how could you do this thing? Well, farmers are very incentivized to be very efficient in what they do. And so to be able to meet them, work with them, and create a feedstock supply that really can benefit for low carbon fuels as well as the other products, it's kind of a win-win-win opportunity. Farmers, producers like Gevo, and ultimately the end customer.
Our thanks to Nancy Young, Chief Sustainability Officer at Gevo, for providing us with that update. And since she and I spoke, we have gotten more updates from Washington on some of those tax credits. The 45Z credit, which is designed for SAF producers and will go into effect in 2026, the first piece of guidance was released last Friday. The IRS said if you are an SAF producer looking to capitalize on some of these tax credits, get registered now. You can find out more at the IRS website if that applies to you. Next week on the program, we'll be talking to our friends from the Clean Fuel Alliance America. They're also working to serve that SAF market, and they're going at it from the perspective of soy oil. And we'll have that update for us next week. Folks, stick with us here today. Propane is another vital energy source on America's farms. And when we come back, we'll talk with Mike Newland of PERC.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. How do you use energy on your farm? Well, it's a question that a lot of folks in agriculture have been asking in recent years, and now there's a new place to do that research. PERC, the Propane Education and Research Council, is partnering with farmers right now to investigate propane usage. Joining me this week is Mike Newland, the Director of Agriculture Business Development with PERC. And Mike, fill us in.
Yeah, so the Propane Education and Research Council has a propane farm incentive program. We partner with local farmers who are buying new propane-powered equipment or upgrading from another energy source to propane. And the opportunity for them is we do offer incentives back to them to help offset the cost. In exchange for that, though, we do want some research back for them. And what we're looking to do is capture their usage data, their experience data, and we pass that on to the equipment manufacturers for them and possibly making enhancements to their equipment in the future.
Now, this doesn't work for every piece of propane equipment on the farm. Mike, I understand there are 5 baskets.
There are. So stationary engines, and in the farm we're thinking about irrigation. So irrigation, power generation. So if you're looking at putting a generator on the farm, that would qualify. Building heat, if you're putting up a new livestock building, a new greenhouse, that would qualify. Water heat, upgrading a water heating system, and then also weed flaming technology.
Okay, so there's a lot of areas that are covered by this. What does the incentive part of the program look like, Mike?
Yeah, so all the details are at propane.com/farm incentive, but it does include incentives up to $5,000. It varies based upon the piece of equipment and the category. So really the best thing I can do is point folks to propane.com/farm incentive. All the details, all the program guidelines are there for review. And I think that's a great place to start.
Now, Mike, I'm not a researcher. How much data manipulation am I going to be required to do as a farmer putting these improvements on my farm?
Yeah, it's really not that difficult. So we're really interested in how many hours you put on the equipment, the amount of propane that went through it, just your general experience with it and your thoughts.
All right, be able to help the industry grow and become more efficient.
Absolutely.
Mike, then could you tell us one more time where folks can find that application?
Propane.com is our main website. Propane.com/farm incentive is the page for that information.
Fantastic. And propane.com, a great resource for anything related to propane.
All things propane at propane.com.
Fantastic. Mike Newland, the Director of Agriculture Business Development with PERC, thanks for talking with us this week.
Thank you very much.
Greg Soulje is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Earlier in the program, Greg outlined some precipitation threats this next week. Greg, who's going to see what and when?
For a change, it is a drier, I repeat, a drier weather pattern for much of the Corn Belt as the week wears on, maybe late in the week, with frontal boundaries settling on south, trying to lift back to the north as the tropics begin to get busy down here. We'll pick up showers and thunderstorms here in the middle and late portions of the week through Florida, the Gulf Coast, parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, some of the areas that have been missed out on recent moisture. And look at the lack of organized moisture across the heart of the Corn Belt. Maybe some spotty to scattered quarter inch. You should be able to work and play through that, get it wrapped up for the season, whether you're just getting to the ground for the first time, second run at it, or just getting things to firm and dry out there in the back 40s. Some scattered moisture for the northeast to New England and into the Pacific Northwest. But one of the better forecasts precipitation-wise for the heartland here over the past few weeks, Mike.
As we push deeper into June, Greg, do you see any warm-ups on the outlook?
We see really a rapid, probably even a quicker demise to El Nino than maybe folks are heads up for. So we have a little more heat and a lot more dry time showing up here, and that may be a concern later on in the mid to late summertime season. We'll officially clock in to summertime on the 20th here and look at the expanding ridge, what was over this particular part of the country, beginning to build back north and northwestward from about the Missouri on westward. One little lobe of low pressure and some cooler up aloft over the northeast and New England. Pacific Northwest, this is okay. Parts of Montana, look at the expanse of dry weather through the Midwest, the Corn Belt, northern and central plains. We suspect a couple of weak tropical systems will begin to get going again in through Florida, perhaps moving into Texas. These waters, Mike, over the Gulf of Mexico, incredibly warm, almost bat-like again, shallow, climatologically speaking. That's where we keep an eye on tropical systems this time of the year.
Does that abnormal heat stick around through the end of June, Greg?
It's a little more progressive, but we see it mid to late summertime locking down. Hence, here is a quick change on a fast-moving disturbance, probably once we scour out some disturbances out of the Gulf of Mexico, but they'll reform on up. And a little low, again, breaks on down. This is, again, not unusual for mid to late June. Normal temperatures, the heat retrogrades over the west and down across the Gulf Coast area. And we get a quick push of some showers and thunderstorms, normal moisture for the Corn Belt, a little weather up and down the eastern seaboard that is wetter, and another tropical system into the eastern Gulf of Mexico.
Hard to believe, Greg, but we're already looking ahead to the Independence Day holiday. What do you see in that first week of July?
Going to be a hot one, I think. Proper lines at the proper beverage stand, I suspect. Look at probably some mid to upper 90s, perhaps as far north as the central Corn Belt, the warmth over the eastern two-thirds of the country, some cooling across the valleys of California. Back to heat here, and the tropics are getting busy again across the Gulf of Mexico.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of heavy-duty grain carts and make the most of your harvest season. Visit Brandt.ca for more. This past week, Des Moines, Iowa played host to the 2024 World Pork Expo, and as you'd expect, National Hog Farmer and Feedstuffs were on the scene. Joining us now is Sarah Muirhead. She's an editor with Feedstuffs. And Sarah, how are the crowds at this year's World Pork Expo?
Well, Mike, the crowds actually have been really amazing. The weather's been terrific. People are out and about in the whole tent area as well as in the exhibit hall. So, you know, they did shorten the event this year. They took it from about 2.5 days to 2 days. So I think everybody just came out and they're packing a lot in these days that we have here.
Well, that's fantastic, Sarah. And as I think back over the last year in pork production, it has been volatile. We've seen losses for the industry. What are the hot topics up for discussion there amongst the crowds?
Well, as you mentioned, the whole economics of the industry is still a hot topic. They're coming out of about 18 months of really economic losses, I mean, record losses. So there's a lot of talk about technology. They're making some money now, so they're looking for some new investments, looking for new ways to build their barns from an innovation standpoint, from a data standpoint. We've been having a lot of discussions about that. A lot of discussions about the disease, animal disease, foreign animal disease in particular. You know, how could we continue to protect our herds from, you know, swine fever and all of these other things that are out there that we need to always be aware of. A lot of discussion on the Farm Bill too, and how we can weave in the foreign animal disease support in the Farm Bill, in the funding side of things.
Absolutely. And Sarah, Feedstuffs 365, the video portal for the Feedstuffs magazine, I know conducts deep interviews on a lot of these different topics. Do you have some of those coming from World Pork Expo?
Oh, we've already got some posted on our website. We'll be posting more of those over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, we've talked from markets to pork demand to foreign animal disease, to innovation. We talked about the barn of the future, which was kind of exciting to do. So lots of interviews. You can find those on feedstuffs.com and nationalhogfarmer.com.
Sarah, more broadly in agriculture, we're hearing a lot of focus on automation. Is automation making its way into the hog industry as well?
Most definitely. It's all about, you know, what we can do to improve profitability as well as improve the performance of our pigs. And all that plays into sustainability and animal welfare. So what can we do to just have a better economic bottom line for our producers, a better environment for our pigs, and to improve pig health? The more pigs we can keep alive and we can keep healthy, the better our sustainability story as well.
Absolutely. That's always true. We can bring more protein into the world as well, which is always a win. Sarah, you will be covering these stories at National Hog Farmer and at Feedstuffs, no doubt, for months to come. Tell our audience, where can they go to keep up with what's happening here in the hog industry?
Oh, lots of different places. We have our daily newsletters. We have our digital edition, and we also have our websites where we're posting. As we go through this show, we're posting live updates, so you can certainly tune in and watch our live streams from here.
Fantastic. Sarah Muirhead, editor at Feedstuffs, thanks so much for joining us for this week's Farm Progress Roundup.
Thank you, Mike.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. In the shed this weekend are tractors that Dad has had as we look forward to Father's Day in just a few days. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, before we get to this weekend's tractors, I just want to mention again that in a few days we'll be in Spencer, Iowa at the Clay County Fairgrounds for the Red Power Roundup, that annual gathering of the International Harvester Collectors Club. I'll be on the program there on Thursday and Friday, the 20th and 21st, with our author-photographer friend Lee Cloncher. We'll see some of you there. Now, the tractors that Dad has had. Here's a John Deere at Whitewater, Wisconsin. A John Deere 4320 that John Hoffman bought new in 1972. And his son, John, says at the age of 88, his father still operates that tractor, maybe cultivating corn with it, in fact. Over the next few days, you might see him out on that 4320 there near Whitewater. In fact, he said his dad runs the combine a little bit every autumn just to keep his streak going. And then at Hampshire, Illinois, here's a J.I. Case 400 Western Special. Oh, look at the fenders on that tractor, made in 1955. Robert Swanson's dad, Chuck, had this tractor. They restored the tractor in 2005, 3 years before Chuck Swanson passed away. You know, here's an interesting common denominator between Mr. Hoffman in Wisconsin and the late Mr. Swanson in Illinois. They were both very active in farm commodity organizations. I remember it well. I remember interviewing those guys at some of those commodity group meetings back in the day. Well, let's see what's selling at Big Iron the week ahead. Here's Mr. Mark Stock.
Well, hello, Max. June is a big month at Big Iron and Sullivan Auctioneers. June the 10th, Van Wall Equipment, Inc. will sell 29 late model John Deere pieces of machinery. The first items start to close at 10 a.m. in the morning Central Time. Then on June the 11th, Midwest Machinery. They have 27 items, late model John Deere equipment, from round balers, quad track tractors, four-wheel drive tractors, draper headers, compact track loaders. There's a John Deere 6R 155 mechanical front tractor with a loader and one without a loader. Also on June the 11th, Adkins Family Farms, their retirement sale features 103 items. There's a John Deere 9360R four-wheel drive tractor and many more high-quality pieces of machinery selling with no reserve. Also on June 11th, we're selling some breeding stock. The livestock market's super hot right now. On Wednesday, June the 12th, over 1,250 items will sell. On Thursday, June the 13th, KC Nielsen Limited, they will have a farm equipment, construction equipment, truck and trailer auction. 120 items selling across Iowa, including a 2023 John Deere 616R self-propelled sprayer, a 2023 John Deere 9RX 590 quad track, and many more late model items. And get ready, Max, for the June 17th and 18th big two-day no-reserve dealer and farmer auction in Hamilton, Illinois. Check it all out on Big Iron.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. We do love to meet that next generation of agricultural leader, and our interview this week is hot off convention. Carly Neer joins us. She's just completed her term as the Kansas State FFA Treasurer. Carly, how was convention last week?
Convention was amazing. It was the perfect bow on a really fulfilling year for my state officer team and I. It was our biggest Kansas FFA convention to date. So we were having the issue of having too many people and not enough space, which is a really good and exciting problem to have. It was really special to celebrate each member that walked across the stage at convention, but also, like I said, just the perfect way to wrap up a really good year for my team and I.
It is great to see everybody, and to hear that kind of growth in Kansas is fantastic. Carly, tell us a little bit about you. Did you grow up in an agricultural family?
Yeah, I did. Both my parents have pretty deep roots in agriculture. My dad grew up on a dairy and my mom grew up raising beef cattle. But when they got married, they decided to do something completely different. So I've grown up on a goat and sheep operation. But my intro into agriculture education and FFA is pretty non-traditional because I was homeschooled. I was homeschooled from the time I was a kindergartner to an 8th grader. And then when my freshman year hit, I decided I only wanted to take ag classes at public school. So really my only exposure to public school was in FFA. So it really opened a lot of doors for me. So I do have a background in agriculture, but kind of a non-traditional way to get to agriculture education in FFA.
Absolutely. What were some of the highlights for you serving throughout high school?
I grew up in the Hayes FFA chapter where I served as a chapter officer for a few years. I can think of a lot of highlights, but a couple would be competing in the Ag Sales Career Development event at Nationals, and then serving on a district officer team my senior year with some really, really close friends.
That's fantastic. Carly, do you hope to make a career in agriculture?
I do. I'm currently studying agriculture education, so I plan to teach agriculture education in the high school classroom someday.
Fantastic. Bringing that next generation to agriculture. Carly Neer, we wish you the best of luck in your future.
Thank you.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. Chad Colby, our resident tech expert, spends a lot of the year traveling across the country, and recently he was back in Boone, Iowa, looking ahead to this year's Farm Progress Show.
Now that the calendar's June, you start looking ahead a month or two, and that takes you right to the 2024 Farm Progress Show, which this year it'll be August 27th, 28th, and 29th in Boone, Iowa. And like you, I'm certainly looking forward to it. I did speak with Matt Youngman this week. Matt's the man who takes care of everything at the show, and Matt said everything is looking very well. All the crops got in good. He said a lot of activity from vendors. Expect pre-COVID numbers, especially in the demonstration area. Lots of activity around autonomous equipment. Most manufacturers have offerings there. Now, if you haven't seen it, take the opportunity to plan some time to see those demonstrations yourself. Certainly you can get in the cab and witness the technology. It's also great when you see it in the field itself. You can see that gentleman there up on the upper right corner of the screen. He's the guy who drove the tractor to the field. Obviously, the tractor is working fully autonomously here. If you attended some shows this winter, like the National Farm Machinery Show, you saw Case IH's new flagship combine. It was unveiled there. Of course, in the middle of winter, you can't see it in the field. The good news is, Matt informed me that not only will it be in the booth, it will also be out in the field. And like you, that'll be before harvest for most of us, so it'll be nice to see that new combine out in the field. There's a lot of other big things that got announced this year as well. And at the Commodity Classic, of course, John Deere rolled out their over 800 horsepower 9RX four-wheel drive tractor, and Matt said that will be there as well. So don't worry, as we get closer to Farm Progress Show, we'll have a lot more information to share, but be sure to mark your calendar for that last week in August. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thanks, Chad. There sure is a lot to be excited about for this year's Farm Progress Show. Folks, get registered, get your tickets at farmprogressshow.com. I've spent a lot of my life climbing around on vintage farm equipment and working with the community that likes to restore vintage farm equipment. And what I've found is that's a group of people that likes face-to-face interaction. Max recently saw how face-to-face interaction provides better service in the industry.
On Steiner Stories, from Steiner Tractor Parts, Brandy Erickson visiting here with us this week, talking about her role at the world headquarters of Steiner Tractor Parts. You've been here 15 years, I understand.
I sure have, yep. It's been really enjoyable working for Steiners. They treat us like part of the family. I couldn't imagine working anywhere else.
We're surrounded by folks talking to Steiner customers. You interact with them via a number of ways, number of different channels, I understand.
Yes, I work with customers from email to live chat, phones. You can reach me multiple ways. Fortunately, we don't have texting yet. But that's in the future as well.
Do you enjoy talking with the customers?
Yes, the customers are the highlight of my day. If you're in a good mood and you want to joke, I like to joke too. I want to help you buy your parts. If you're in a bad mood and you're upset over something, I want to make your day better.
Some folks will come to you with problems. They're not sure how to solve the issue that they have, and you enjoy working through those with them.
Yes, yep. They're trying to make something work on their tractor, then I will give you as much advice as I can to help you get the right parts, get you back in the field and moving.
You interact with them via the chat function as well, I understand, and that's a little bit different, isn't it? There's not as much personality that comes through there, I suppose.
No, live chat is very different than over the phones. A lot of those questions are about the process of how our website works, and they typically go a lot faster than a phone call would go.
One thing I have found in the past that your website does work remarkably well. I mean, it's easy to use, it seems like.
Yeah, we have a parts picker feature on our website, and that you just put in your make and model of your tractor, and it pulls up every part that we carry that fits your tractor.
One thing that folks talk about after they have been on the line with somebody from Steiner is how great the experience is. You try to leave them with a good feeling, don't you?
Oh, definitely. We're a family-owned business. The owners treat us like family. That encourages all of us here to treat our customers like family. We want to help them get their parts. There is no press 1 to talk to somebody in returns, press 2. The minute you call in, you're getting a live representative as soon as we can get on the phone with you. Just to help get things taken care of as quickly as possible.
Brandy Erickson here at Lennon, Michigan at Steiner Tractor Parts. New parts for old tractors.
Thanks, Max, for that update, and we'll be watching for future Steiner stories in weeks to come. And folks, thanks to you for tuning in this week. We'll continue talking about the issues that matter to agriculture, whether it's policy or markets or business. We'll talk about them right here on This Week in Agribusiness. Be sure to join us next time. We'll see you. Take care, everyone.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.